So today, basically, we would be talking about Terraform modules. In case if you are interested in knowing about modules, you can always go to my repository, which is over here. Click on repository over here, wherein I have gone ahead and created a module myself. This is for EC2 module where I have created the files main.tf, output.tf, and variable.tf. Similarly, one is for module, which is for VPC, and one is basically a testing module. So this part I have already done. Just in case if you are interested, you might go and see this. In this one, what I have not done is a module of S3. So basically, we would be continuing the things that we talked about yesterday, and we would be working on those things. So I'll start off from complete scratch, basically. Right now, I'm not interested more in the provider and the access key and stuff. I'm only interested in creating the modules. So that's what I'm going to do over here. Let's start step one. Let's go and okay, not required now. Go and create a new folder. Let's call it as Terraform-19 April. Put it over here. Drag and drop. Here I would be creating two folders. Let's say I'm calling it something like, let's say module. And this I am creating another folder, which I am calling it as a testing folder. So two folders are always required when you work on module. Or right now, let's make it easy. Actually, let's say I just decide to go ahead and create a module. So a module will always have few specific files, which would be main.tf. It would be having something like variables.tf. It can have a file known as output.tf as well. So my majority of the work happens from main.tf and variables.tf. So that's what we are going to do today. Output.tf also can be required in case you want to go and output any variable. We are not complicating it to that level. Today, we'll only talk about a module. So we'll do that. So I'm also adding a file over here. Let's say readme.md. The objective of this is whatever I want to do inside this specific code, I would be writing it. So I'm writing something like, let's say, this is the module for S3 in AWS. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do here. Now comes the main.tf file. And let's also go and write what are the things that we would be doing. This, let's say, module will do the below. And let's say one, it will create a S3 bucket. And let's say two, it will update some file or something inside S3 that we have already done. So let's go and do something else. Let's say it will also enable or disable the versioning. Okay. And then as much as you want, you can go and complicate it. I'll start off with creation of S3 bucket. So whatever things I need actually goes inside my main.tf file. Example of that is, let's go and talk about Terraform S3. Over here, this AWS S3 bucket. And now what I would do is I would just go and copy this as it is and paste it over here. Okay. Now comes the important part. And this, if you understand, good for you. That's pretty much it about modules. You see this bucket over here. This bucket that I am creating is having some specific name, right? These tags are having some specific name, and this is having some specific name. What I do not want is that if I go and just say this is a module, yes, it has multiple resources, yes. But the problem with this is always having some static data. This we also call it as hard-coded data. Why? Because whatever I do, this bucket name is going to remain the same. So yesterday we did talk about our local variables inside Terraform in the previous class, wherein I can go and create a local block over here. So let's say something like locals. I create something known as a, let's say, bucket and name equal to, and I give some name over here. So in that case, I can go over here and just say local.bucket_name, and that can be done. Yes. But again, the problem with this approach is locals variables are good, but just like a local variable inside a function, this can only be used inside this main.tf file. But what if someone from external world has to go and call this specific module? In that case, what I would do is instead of writing a local variable, I would actually be going and creating a variable over here. The thing is variables.tf. So how I do, I just go and say variable. I would go and give something like, let's say, bucket underscore name. And over here, I would be typing few things. First would be the let's say, what is the type of that? It can have multiple type. It can have a string. It can have a boolean. It can have a number and so on. Next is the description. So what generally I do is whenever I have to go and write the description, instead of going and writing the complete thing, I would go down over here and I would just go and say something like this. So inside the bucket, inside the description, I just write things like that. And basically, if you want, you can also go and give something known as default. Okay. Default I basically do because in case someone is not passing the specific variable, in that case, it would be giving some default value. And this can be anything, absolutely. Actually, it can be something like, let's say here, Ankit bucket 19 APR 2023. Okay, it can be anything, depends on you. Now comes the best part about it. If you understand this, actually, you are pretty good to get started. Just a minute. Okay, so over here inside our main.tf file, we have to give the bucket name, right? Instead of writing the name over here, I would just say var dot and it comes as bucket underscore name. So yes, someone has to go and pass the value inside this specific variable. What it is, we would talk about it in some time once we go inside our testing module. But for now, basically, this much should be good for me. So I have created this. Next, let's say I want to go and add a tag over here. So first thing that I do is I go to my variable and again, I would go and just click here. And let's say I give something as tag underscore name. And the same old story, I would be giving the type equals to, let's say, a string, and I would be having the description. And I would say tag basically is my thing. So I won't find any documentation from anywhere. What I would suggest to you is when you are doing it in your companies, actually, whosoever gave you this work, please ask them that what are the tags that you actually use in the organization. Two things. First thing, they now know that you are actually working on this and you are asking the right questions, which is very important for you, at least in the companies. Second thing is you get to know that what are the tags which are required. So over here, like you see, I have name, I have environment, I can have something like, let's say, date, something like that. Okay. So I would be having three tags. One would be name, environment, followed by a date. So what I would do is description, I will say the name of the tag. And if you want to give any default value, you can go and give that. I am putting something as name over here. Okay, so that's one tag. Next is, let's say, environment. Let's say the environment, and whatever I see here, I'm just putting it as it is over here. And then let's say one, I have added something as date over here. Okay, so date, this, and let's say default is date. So I can have all of these tags over here. Now, the only thing that is required from my perspective is instead of doing it like this, I would say var dot, and ideally it should automatically prompt. In some cases, if it doesn't, basically just put this, go and click on format document. Everything should be good. Default, I have this, I have this, I have, good for me. Now, basically, let's just go and say format document. And let's go and give the name var dot. If it doesn't come up, no worries, just go and copy paste from here. Let's say tag underscore name, and then I have something like var dot tag underscore environment, and date is something like var dot, and let's say tag underscore date. I keep it in that way, tag underscore. Again, it depends on you, from person to person. It depends how you are actually doing it. So basically, this is my resource, a module that I have created, which is basically having a bucket. The only thing that I would suggest you is not to use this. This, if you do, it only creates a bad impression on whosoever gave you the assignment. I would generally prefer you writing it as this. Why this? Basically, go for any module actually of Terraform, and just go and look at how people who are working in Terraform or who are actually building modules are actually doing. That basically would give you a good understanding of how things are actually done. So if you look over here, this is your from Terraform itself. They are naming it as this. The beauty of using it like this is if you here, if you are referring to something, you would simply say this dot. So basically it becomes very easy for you to do. Now, the second thing that we were talking about yesterday was if you want to go and enable or create a bucket or not. So I would just go and create a variable and let's say call it as create underscore bucket. And here I would be having type equals to, let's say, Boolean, and description, I would be say enable bucket or not. And by default, generally, we always give as false because we don't want to go and create anything. This basically, I would recommend you to go and read about it. This is something known as a dry run. Okay. So if in case you are working on AWS and especially on any of the cloud, once you just want to go and run something and see that is this command or is this instruction set actually good or not? This inside AWS is known as dry run. Short thing, you just go and give hyphen hyphen dry run. That should be good. Inside Terraform also you can do that. You can do a Terraform validate or a Terraform after that a Terraform plan. Plan will not do anything, as you know. It will just tell you that if in case it goes through, this is what actually is going to happen. So any which ways, we did talk about our ternary operator yesterday. So ternary operator, I believe you would have already seen this and you would remember this as well. So I'm going to use something like this. My variable is create bucket. So I would go over here and write something as count. And I would say it is dependent on this. If it is true, create 1, else create 0. So in short, what's going to happen is a bucket would be created if this variable is set to true. One thing to pay attention is inside the module, I am not giving provider.tf, and that is knowingly happening actually. Taking a typical example, let's say I decide to go and use this module of Terraform AWS VPC. So the people, those who actually go on and create the modules, you'll figure out that they also don't give providers.tf because from your perspective, you just have to go and use this. You would say module and whatever parameters are required over there, right? So in that case, they are also not giving you providers, else anyone over here is going to go and use those specific providers. So for that reason, basically, I do not give anything like providers.tf. Please do not do this in your job also when you are working. That would happen inside a separate file, which would be something known as a testing or as a example. So if in case you are interested how people do it, inside that only they would create something as example, and they would have already gone and told you also that, see, if you are looking for those things, please go and give these specific values as it is over there. Okay, so that is how it is done. Any which ways, let's go back to the job. We wanted to talk about our variables, and what did we want to do? Okay, yeah, we wanted to enable or disable the versioning. So when you are actually working on module over here, so just see if you see something as versioning and it says that this is deprecated, rather you should use this specific thing, AWS S3 bucket and versioning. And it is also telling you that, see, if in case you go and try to create a bucket over here with versioning enabled, this is how it should look like, AWS S3 bucket. Pay attention, this is already done over here, so I don't have to do much. If I want to go and enable versioning, I just have to go do something like this and something like this. And the only thing is this becomes this.id. So AWS S3 bucket, which is over here, dot this dot ID. And this also, I would go and give something like this. Okay, so I'm adding that. It would automatically add over here. Now, it is not important that the versioning would always be enabled. If you see, it can be something as enabled. It can be something as disabled, right? So what I would do is, again, inside variable.tf over here, I would just go and create a new variable, or let's start from scratch only. I would say, let's say S3 underscore versioning. Okay, and I have something known as type, let's say string, and I have something known as description. Okay, and description basically, let's say bucket I have, and I need the status of it, right? So I would just go and say this description equals to done, and you can remove this if required. I don't like it. And basically, if provided no one is giving anything, I have to give the default value over here, and I am giving it as enabled. Okay, so what I have done in short is I have created a file which is variables.tf, and my main.tf basically is having a S3 bucket and is having the bucket versioning over there. Now, if you want, you can go and add multiple things inside S3 bucket depending on your requirement. You want ACL, you don't want ACL, or whatever way it is. So taking example, let's take an ACL also. So if I give something like this, you understand it would become something like this. And this also becomes over here this, and this object ownership is bucket owner preferred. If you go down, you are going to see multiple ways how it is having that specific values. So bucket owner preferred, or whatever way you want. I am giving this. If you want, you can also go and give it with a specific variable name. So I go back to my variables over here, this, and we wanted to do something like, let's say, object ownership, right? So S3 underscore, let's say, object ownership, and let's search for that documentation. Should be somewhere down. If it is not there, no, nothing can be done about it. You'll have to go and write it yourself. So let's say the object ownership of the bucket. And what I generally also do is just like over here, no, valid values are this. I also write it like that. So it basically becomes the same way as all other variables are there, and it is bucket owner preferred. Now, those of you who know AWS would already realize that if you go inside your S3, this thing is good right now, but once you go inside S3 and you click on create bucket over here and this thing over here, AWS is automatically telling you that starting in April, anyhow, this is not going to work, right? So this is a change that is going to happen inside S3. So it doesn't matter much right now, but just in case if you are watching this on or before May 1, 2023, then this thing matters to us. So S3 object ownership, I would just go and say, okay, I need this default value also. So I would go and give this. And apart from this, I would just go here and say something like, let's say var dot this. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I'm just adding 3 resources right now. You can go and add as many as you want. The next thing is I have to obviously test it out. So I would go and create something known as examples. Now, if I have to do the classic way, how people do is what others do, that they create the example inside this folder itself. But then the issue with that is you have to go and remove your providers.tf file, and the client generally doesn't want that because you have multiple blocks. You have Terraform block, you have init, you have the modules, you have the versioning, you have the workspaces, everything. We don't want that. So for that reason, I go and create something as a testing folder over here. And inside this, the classic main.tf file, and I would be having something like providers.tf. Okay. Inside providers.tf, just like yesterday, I have AWS and I have the access key. Access key equals to something, and let's say secret key equals to something, and let's say region equals to something. This I'm putting it as, let's say, AP South 1. I need the access key. So for that, I go back to my AWS IAM here. And I would go and again create a user. Let's call this user as, let's say, this. I would attach the policies directly. I'm just making them admin for now. Next, create user. Next, Terraform S3 here, access key. This, next, create, and I have the access key with me, and I also have the secret key with me. Okay, I didn't copy it. Seems. Okay, so that's my provider block. Next, let's go to main.tf, and this is where you need to pay attention. Though even if you go to Google and you just go and say Terraform, let's say VPC module, and it will tell you exactly what has to be done. So if you go down over here, it is telling you have to do something like module and you have to give something like source. But what I would recommend you is, for easy learning, just open up my repository over here, repository, go for your Terraform EC2 VPC module, and go to testing over here and just look at main.tf. How do I import it? I have the module over here. Okay. So let's go and apply that logic. So what I would do is module, and let's name it something like, let's say S3. Okay. Inside this, I would be having something as source. If you see it will automatically prompt me. If I go and just type dot, it is automatically telling me that you have that module over here. Okay, I would strongly recommend you to go and give it a logical name like module hyphen S3. This is for testing. In reality, I would have done something like module hyphen S3. In that case, this also has to be updated. So let's say this and module hyphen S3. Okay, and now the only thing that is left is if I am calling this module, it is expecting some variables, and the variables are first is bucket underscore name. I would be passing that as it is. Let's say bucket name equals to Ankit 19th or Ankit uh, April 2023. Okay. Next, it is also expecting something as, let's say, create underscore bucket. Or let's do it. Let's try it out this way and we will see a interesting thing and then we'll come back. Okay. So fine. LS, I go to my folder of testing. I go and do a Terraform init. We'll obviously go get the plugins, get the modules, and install those things. Let's wait for that to happen. I'm just waiting for it to get completed. Okay, good. Happened. Perfect. Next, let's go and do a Terraform first, validate to see if everything is good. And it says that this is a error and it is looking for something like this dot count dot index. This thing is a interesting thing basically, and the reason for that is, so if you go over here, actually, it will tell you that there is no problem with this, but this generally will give you a problem. And the answer for this, actually, I would leave it, okay, to give you a short answer for that is this of 0. If you give something like this and something like this, it is to do something with the array part, basically. Okay, so let me just show you once. Okay, if you go and do a validate over here, it will go and say everything is good. You go and do a Terraform plan, and it will show you basically that, okay, these are the things that I would be created, and it does not understand any element. And the reason for this is, as we speak right now, this specific bucket is not getting created. Okay, this part basically is not getting created. So what I am doing over here is I am giving the name of the bucket or the ID of the bucket. Easy way to see that is, let's go and do this part over here, this part over here. If I just go and give the bucket name and go to and do a Terraform plan, it will say that, okay, I would go and do those things, pretty much good. Terraform apply, let's go and say, and basically it will ask me and you go and do a yes, and it will say that this bucket is over here, region is incorrect, which means inside my providers, have I not given AP South one? Fair enough. So basically I have gone and done that, but it says that the region is incorrect. Short answer for this is basically over here, when you went ahead and created the bucket, you said that you want to create the bucket and it is all dependent on this specific thing. Okay, just a minute. I basically did a mistake and this variable is actually bucket underscore name. Okay, let's fix it. Okay, let's try it again. Go and say yes, and it should say that blah, blah, blah. All of the things over here. Let's wait for it to get completed. Okay, so this part basically is going to take a lot of time. And actually, if you see, this is never going to happen. I would just give you the option to unmute yourself if in case anyone knows that why this is taking so much time and the bucket is actually not getting created. If anyone knows the answer. This we discussed yesterday also.
Depends on.
Sorry, Heman?
We need to give the depends on that S3.
Okay, that's one. And you see, bucket versioning and these things. Actually, okay, let's take it this way. So what is happening over here actually is, let's just stop it. Okay, what you said basically is not wrong. Let's go and do that. I say depends on, and this actually depends on the bucket. Good for us. And we also go and give depends on, and we give bucket. And basically, I do a Terraform apply. It will tell me I would go and do this. I go and type yes over here, only to realize that nothing goes on. This is going to wait until infinity and nothing is going to come on. Any quick answer why? This again we talked about yesterday. Fair enough. Yesterday we talked about something known as count. If you have to create the bucket, it depends on this variable create underscore bucket. And this is an interview question. People will say, what is the priority of the variables that you are giving? So what actually is the priority? You see, a bucket is created or a bucket is created or not. It actually depends on this variable create underscore bucket. The testing function, which is actually calling it, is not providing any value, which means whatever is inside variable.tf value will go because it has default value of false. Now, because this is false, it goes to main.tf. It says, are you true? No. So basically the count becomes 0, which means the bucket is never created. Now, if the bucket is not created, it depends on this bucket. Basically, this also keeps on waiting and this also keeps on waiting. That is the short answer why this was not created. Two ways to fix it. Basically, the best way is to go and give true over here. Let's go into a Terraform apply and see. Yes, go and do that and it will tell you that created, and it's going to tell you if it went through. Click over here, it tells you that indeed a bucket has been created. And if you go to the properties, you would see that the bucket versioning has also been enabled, which means this variable over here takes the precedence of whatever resources I am passing. So if you don't give anything, it is anything to do inside the module and the default value. Now, if you had not given even default value, no, then it would have been a mess. For that reason, basically, we try to go and give the default values as much as possible. Any which ways, my create underscore bucket value by default is false. So for that reason, this nothing goes through. But if inside my main.tf, I go and give create underscore bucket as true, in that case goes over here. This basically it is created and the bucket is created and basically the dependencies. And yes, just like Yaman said, if you go and create the resources and you put something as depends on, it's a good way basically because you know that this resource will only be created after the previous resource has been done. Next part, if we go back to this, we see that the tags only are environment as environment, date as date, name as name. And the reason for that is inside my variable.tf, those are the default values. But now we understand if we go and give a tag over here, and I say the tag name is this, right? So let's say this, and let's go back to my variables and say tag underscore environment. I said this is something known as dev, and I go and give something as tag underscore date, and I say this is something as, let's say 19, because it is string, it accepts anything, actually anything. Let's say 2023, and I go and do a Terraform apply again. And I say yes. So basically, if you go back, refresh the page over here now, you would see tag and you indeed see that tags have been modified. Okay, so whatever things are over there is actually coming up over here. The only thing that I can suggest you now is, you see this bucket name, I have to give it two places, right? So what I would do is I would go and create a local variable where I would create something as, let's say bucket underscore name equals to, let's say this. And if I have to refer to this, I would say local dot bucket underscore name, and I would say local dot bucket underscore name over here as well. Let's go and do that. This part here and here. So the concept is this itself is calling a module. That module values are inside variable.tf and it is reading it from there. And basically this main.tf itself is having the local values. Beauty of that, go and do Terraform apply and everything. Right now, though, nothing is going to happen, pretty obvious. The reason is that this, I have nothing, or I have not gone and changed anything. Let's say I decide to go and create it like, let's say instead of 2023, 2024 over here, let's click on save. This, now some things are going to change, obviously. Uh, Type yes, and basically let's go back and is it done? Good. And this environment basically becomes 19 April 2024. Okay, so that basically is how you go and create a module. Next, you go and create the testing. Let me just end it over here by giving one more simple example. So let's say that I go over here and I decide to go and select the bucket, and this bucket has been deleted. You can't delete it. Okay, you can actually delete it. The reason is I'm not deleting it from Terraform. Okay, this, and I click on delete bucket. Now what is there is my local is saying that this resource is there. This is saying the resource is not there. Go and do a Terraform apply over here. And now what will happen is go and type yes. And only after you go and give yes, type yes. And indeed, whatever resource is there actually will come up over here as well. Okay, so yes, you have to go and do it, or you have to go and change it manually. Okay, so that's the concept behind this. So if in case you want it to be created again, the reason is this TF state file. Now, there are other ways to do it. Let's say I decide to delete the bucket from here, this, and let's give the bucket name, this, and let's say somehow I delete my state file also. Now, if you go and do this, basically Terraform has no way to understand if this resource was indeed getting created or not. So you decide to go and give yes over here. And basically, again, the resources are going to be created. Okay, so that's a way by which you can go and create the resources and basically create the modules. It can happen in different ways. Let's say you decide to go and create a different module altogether. That can be done as well. Okay, so this is basically how you go and create the modules. Basically, inside your TF state file, if you go and do something like that, it is not going to go and destroy. You would have to go and do it manually. So avoid destroying things or your TF state file. So that's basically about a module. I would leave it with this. If you go to the repository over here, you are going to see I have created for EC2 and for VPC. There is one more that I have done in front of you today, that is S3. You can go and put as much as you want. Actually, it all depends on you. There is no hard and fast rule. Just try to go create the modules actually. And if you have any problems, let me know.